thing about Warlock patrons is you can sometimes get your players super mad. So let's not do that. Welcome to Intelligence 14 Wisdom 2, and today we're going to continue our discussion of Warlocks and their patrons and the relationships between them. Before we talked about the packs of the Warlock, the specific terms and conditions of what the Warlock's supposed to do and how much the patron is involved in the Warlock's life, today we're talking about the personality of the patron, how their emotional relationship is with the Warlock. I'm going to give you some tips that I learned the very hard way. Tip number 1, the patron is the same alignment as the Warlock. If you don't like alignment, then okay. They have the same moral personality as the Warlock. Point is, the Warlock and the patron agree on moral things, and they do mostly the same things. If the Warlock is more chaotic and carefree spirit, doesn't really care about duty too much, they're just doing what's fun, then the patron is also carefree, doesn't care too much about duty, only cares about what's fun. If the Warlock is caring and compassionate and wants to help others, then generally the patron should be so. Let me give you a real-world example of why you should do this. You wouldn't contribute to a political campaign for somebody who has different political opinions than you, as a general rule. If I am a Democrat, I'm not going to give money to a Republican or a Libertarian. I'm going to give money to Democrats. The same thing is true for Warlock patrons. They're not going to give magical power to somebody who's going to use it in a way that they don't like. This just makes things so much easier. Instead of there being antagonism between the Warlock and the patron, which translate to antagonism between you and the character, there is mutual respect and agreement. There's a good relationship as opposed to a bad relationship, which is what you want. Now, you might say, well, what about Fiend Pact Warlocks? If somebody wants to play a Fiend Pact Warlock, what should I do? I can't make them good. Can't even make them neutral. They have to be evil, because they are evil. That's the definition of a fiend. Well, then the player has to also be evil. Or switch it to something like the Commission Quest Pact. Or just the investment type pact. But don't make them give quests to the Warlock because you know they are going to have problems. It might be, dramatic that you are serving this devilish deity. You're trying to break this pact that you have made. Or you're trying to stay and keep this power. But the problem is, there's going to be a lot of tension at the table. And unless you're very experienced and know what you're doing, and the player also knows what they're doing, you're going to have a lot of problems. And the second piece of advice I have, which is somewhat related to the first, is the patron agrees with and supports the Warlock in the majority of their decisions, especially the major ones. The reason this should be so is that the Warlock is the player's character. The player completely controls the Warlock. And like I said in the previous video, the player should have complete control over the Warlock's life. The Warlock shouldn't be in control of their life, but the player should have complete control as if they were the author or the editor of their character's story. The patron is part of the Warlock story. They are part of the Warlock's character, and so the player also has at least partial control over the patron. If you as the DM make the patron turn against the Warlock, that feels like you are turning the patron against the player. I did this once. It was terrible. I talked about this guy in the past video, the Warlock who's trying to get revenge against this bad guy, and he became a Warlock of the Sea Serpent who was also trying to get revenge against the bad guy. The Warlock went off and raided a magic shop, and he got arrested. I, as his patron, went over in a dream and berated him for doing such a stupid thing. That was me berating him through the patron. And the Warlock said, no, I was going to use these magic items to go fight the bad guy, like we wanted. Fight our enemy. You'll be able to avoid those problems if you make sure that the patron agrees with and supports the Warlock on most things. Again, they should be compatible. So if you have to rework the patron to be more of a neutral character, then do so. It'll cause a lot less stress at the table. Sure, it won't be as, canonical and complete and consistent, but you'll protect yourself from a lot of issues.